Go.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Let's see. Go ahead and let it go.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll hold it. Okay, you got it. Okay, do your own, Gil. Identify the composer from a list of Identify the composer of a piece of classical music from a list of famous musicians. Go ahead and circle the objective and underline the conditions. The more you do this, the easier it gets. Until you get to start writing your own.
Yeah, I went ahead and went through chapter 9 and did all that extra practice stuff. And then
That's good. That's good. It will really help you as you're writing your own, because that's going to be your homework for this week. Start writing your own objectives. Okay. And hopefully this is what you got. What was the performance again? Identify. You got it. And it's from a list of famous musicians. Okay. So last thing we're going to talk about is evaluation. Okay. Now, and I think this is probably one of the greatest contributions that Maker makes. I love the active teaching part, but this is also equally as important. Evaluation. Whenever we're teaching, we really have to stop and think about what are our expectations? What kind of competence do we expect our students to have? When I was at Wayne State, I'll never forget, I was sitting in class one day and I remember a professor said to me in my graduate program that his expectation, his philosophy is that every student in the classroom was going to be successful. And I remember stepping back and thinking, okay, that guy's a lunatic. Some kids don't care. They come into your classroom, they don't give a darn. They sleep through your class. I was subbing at the time, and I had lots of kids that were trying to do that. They don't want to do well. They're totally disconnected from school, especially by high school, because I was secondary. And I remember him challenging us and saying, when that kid comes into your classroom and that kid falls asleep, you have to look at yourself and say, what am I doing to not inspire that child to learn? That made me mad. It made me angry. I thought, why is it my problem? It can be the parent's problem. It can be the kid's problem. It can be anybody. It's not my problem. But I'll tell you what, I took that challenge home and I mulled it over for the rest of the quarter, for the rest of the year, and all the way into student teaching. And by the time I got to student teaching, I decided to embrace that philosophy. And so my really, truly, and I mean this with all of my heart, when I come into a classroom, if somebody's not learning, I always look first at myself. What can I do differently? This is hard for you. Okay, somebody's fallen asleep. All right, what have I not done? They haven't been up enough. They haven't been, thinking about adding those physiological breaks that I've been modeling for you guys. Maybe they're struggling with content. Can I meet them after class? Can I do a different kind of learning activity? What can I do? And I remember that first year of teaching, one kid in general came up to me and he said, Mrs. Fonte, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I don't like school, and all my teachers know it, and so stop trying to make me learn. And I remember at the end of the year, that same student coming back and just telling me how much he had appreciated the class. Because we don't know what's going on in people's lives. But I think for us as beginning teachers, it's so critical to look at each child and say they should have an opportunity to learn in my class. And if they're not, what can I do differently? What you're going to find, guys, when you go in the field is there's lots of teachers who will not take that perspective. There's lots of teachers who will say, well, you can't teach all kids. Some kids just don't care. You cannot make them care. But I really believe that when you walk into a classroom with an attitude of, what can I do to serve you? Or even into a relationship like marriage and parenting with, what can I do to change it? What can I do to change myself? Because look, I can't change Gil. He is who he is. He's had the experiences that he's had. That's Harold. What?
He's Harold, I'm Gil.
That's Harold, that's Gil. See, I can't change that. All the gold class, thank you guys. Thanks. See? I did a lot of things wrong. I can't change who you guys are. I can't change the experiences that you've had. But what I can change is I can change myself. I can learn your names. I can. And remember them. I can look at myself and say, these are ways that I can do strategies differently. And I hope that you really think about that as we go forward. Okay. So Mager says, when we're teachers, we got to think about what are our expectations for students. If you guys ever had a final project where you ask the teacher what her expectations are, and she goes, whatever. You just, she'll say, you've got a final unit due, and the teacher will say, just do what you think is right. And then you do what you think is right, and you turn it into the teacher, you get it back, and it's got a C on it. And you say, you said just to do what I thought was right. And the teacher's like, well, you just didn't do it. And I think a lot of teachers really struggle with making their expectations clear. Okay, so Maker says, here are some ideas to think about when you're putting together your criteria, is how fast do you need students to be able to do it? How correct? If we're going to take that perspective or that philosophy that all kids can be successful to heart, how successful do they need to be? How good does their writing need to be? How good does their math skills need to be? How good is good enough? And what's the quality? What's the quality that we're going to require from our kids? What do we need to see out of them? Okay, so I love this. Mager basically came up with this trick. It's called the Hey Gopher. And then Gopher's this imaginary guy that you're talking to. And you say, hey Gopher, I want to figure out if this person has achieved good writing skills. Real quickly, you guys, what are some things that we would see if somebody had good writing skills? Punctuation, syntax, what else? Content, right? Voice, grammatical structure, all those kinds of things. So we actually, before we give the student the assignment, we think about that. We lay out what our expectations are. We say, this assignment is going to be 3 to 5 pages. It's going to have good grammatical structure. It's going to have dramatic voice. It's going to be persuasive. You're going to have 5 or 6 resources. And so when we give that assignment sheet out and it's listed all that criteria, don't you guys feel better? Mm-hmm. You got it. Okay. He also says we have to ask, how well does the learner have to perform to achieve the objective? I love this example he gives us. Remember he asked about the surgeon? He says, how good do you want your surgeon to be? Well, pretty good. If he's like, opening me up, I want that man to be I darn well want him to be better than a C-level surgeon. I want him to be the best, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. How good do we want our learners to be? How good is good enough? We got to ask that question, okay? So he says, all right, so here's your chance. Ready? On this statement, go ahead and I want you guys to circle the performance. I want you to underline the condition, and then in parentheses, put in parentheses the criteria. Circle the performance, underline the condition, in parentheses, give us criterion. Okay, what's the performance? Good. Okay, what's the condition? You got it. Okay, and so what's the criteria?
10 Mager stars.
Good job. Okay, there it is. Okay, and that's the end. So we can stop that.
Okay.